It's pouring with rain somewhere in Taipei, and we see two teenagers going into a phone box for shelter. Inside, they shake themselves dry and light cigarettes. They then proceed to steal the money from the phone. At the same time, somewhere else in the city, we see another teenage boy sat in his room. He sees a cockroach and stabs it with a compass. He throws the cockroach out of the window, but later it comes back, and in an attempt to flick it away, he smashes the window and cuts his hand. Meanwhile, the other teenage boys, who we'll later learn are called Adze and Aping, are riding through the streets on their motorbike. Adze gets to his rundown apartment block, and when he gets inside, he finds that his apartment is completely flooded. This doesn't seem to faze him, however. Instead, he just lies on his bed, finds a half-smoked cigarette, and lights it up. The boy who cut his hand earlier is Xiao-kang. We see him riding his scooter through the streets. He arrives at a tutoring centre where he's studying and asks for a refund. Back in the apartment, Adze can hear his brother having sex with a girl in the next room. At the same time, Xiao-kang is eating in a canteen and gets handed a flyer for a girlfriend chat line. He then goes outside and finds that the police have confiscated his scooter. His dad, a taxi driver, sees him and offers him a lift. Adze bumps into the girl who was in his brother's room. They take the elevator downstairs together, and the girl asks if she can have a lift to where she's going. Meanwhile, in the taxi, Xiao-kang's dad suggests that they go to the cinema together. Xiao-kang then sees Adze and the girl riding past. At the traffic lights, Xiao-kang's dad honks his horn at Adze because he wants to turn right. Adze moves out of the way, but as the car passes, he smashes the wing mirror and speeds off. The dad thinks that it's another car that has hit him. Following the incident, the dad doesn't want to go to the cinema anymore. We see Xiao-kang's mum at a temple, watching a ritual being performed. Later, when she is back at home, she tells the dad that at the temple, the priestess told her that Xiao-kang is the reincarnation of the deity Najà, and that Najà hated his dad, which is why the dad and Xiao-kang don't get along now. The dad doesn't believe her. Xiao-kang overhears his parents and then proceeds to act as if he's possessed. The mum is scared, and the dad throws a bowl of rice at him in anger. We see Adze and Aping riding through the streets on a night out. The girl, Akui, is at a roller skating rink, working on the counter. She is happy to see the boys when they arrive. They talk about their plan for the night and agree to wait for Akui to finish and then go to watch a film. After the film, they eat and drink and have fun together. By the end of the night, they're all quite drunk. Akui passes out and the boys take her to a hotel room. Aping alludes to wanting to take advantage of her, but Adze tells him to go and they leave. The next morning he is in his apartment and Akui calls him from the hotel. At first she is angry that he left her there, but in the end she asks if he will call her again. We see Xiao-kang at the tutoring centre getting a refund. He takes the money and goes to a market. He looks around the shops, buys a BB gun, and so on. He then sees the other group and recognises the boy and girl from the earlier incident with his dad's car. He sits in a restaurant across from them and watches. He then follows Adze and Aping into an arcade. Later we see Adze and Aping smashing the padlock of a heavy metal door. Xiao-kang sees them. Back inside the arcade, the two boys enjoy themselves, oblivious to Xiao-kang always watching them. The boys go into the toilet, then the arcade closes and they still haven't come out. Meanwhile, Akui waits for Adze, but eventually she leaves, angry that she has been stood up. The arcade closes with all three boys inside. Adze and Aping come out from the toilet and start stealing the motherboards from the arcade machines. They exit by the back door, but Xiao-kang can't get out. He manages to escape when the security guard comes back in the morning. We see Xiao-kang's dad at the tutoring centre asking where his son is. The receptionist tells him that Xiao-kang has quit the school. At the roller skating rink, Akui calls a man and flirts with him. Xiao-kang comes in and rents some roller skates from her. She walks out of work and sees Adze waiting for her. He wants to hang out, but she says she has a date. He follows her to where she meets the guy she set up a date with on the phone earlier. She argues with Adza, but they eventually end up in a hotel together. Outside the hotel, Shao Kang vandalizes Adza's motorbike. Once he is finished, he returns home. His parents are very angry with him, and his dad refuses to let him in. Needing a place to sleep, he goes to the same hotel as Adza and Akwe. In the middle of the night, Adza leaves Akwe and goes to an arcade. He returns later to find she's left. Shao Kang watches as Adza discovers what has happened to his bike. Shao Kang jumps and dances in celebration. Adza pushes his bike down the road, and Shao Kang follows him. He offers him help, but Adza tells him to get lost. Later, Adza and Aping go to an arcade and try to sell the stolen motherboards. The people from the arcade they stole them from are there and end up chasing them out and beating them up. Adza gets away, but Aping is beaten badly. They flag down a taxi, and the driver is Shao Kang's dad. It isn't clear whether or not he recognises Adza. The boys get back to Adza's apartment, and Adza tries to take care of Aping. Aping says he'd like to have a girl to hug to make him feel better. The apartment starts to flood, and Adza tries to stop it, but he can't. Then Akwe arrives. He tells her that he was unlucky today because he ended up in the taxi of the guy whose wing mirror he smashed, and it made him feel really bad. She says she felt bad when she woke up alone in a hotel. She asks him if they should just give up. Adza asks her to hug Aping, and she does. She then leaves. Adza follows her. They kiss and cry. She says she wants to leave with him somewhere, but neither of them knows where to go. Shao Kang goes to the telephone dating place he read about on the flyer, and the receptionist explains that the girl's cool, and if all is well, they organise a date. Shao Kang goes into a booth, and soon the phone rings. He doesn't answer it, however. Instead, he leaves, and the film ends with shots of traffic on a random street. Rebels of the Neon God is more complex than it first appears, and doesn't easily fit into any one genre category. It is in part a slice of life film, in part a revenge story, and in part a love story. But, for me at least, it is most of all a coming-of-age story. I think that ultimately, what we see in the film are a group of young people with adolescent fantasies coming to realise that life is actually much harder than it appears. There are in fact times in the film when it looks like it might become a straightforward coming-of-age story. Parts of it are even reminiscent of classic 80s and 90s teen films. However, it never actually slips into that territory. For example, rather than the two main boys being shown as cliché lovable rogues who always come up good in the end, we see them as the not particularly successful petty criminals that they are, and by the end of the film they learn the hard way what a life of crime is really like. Likewise, a more typical coming-of-age film would have Shao Kang reconcile with his parents by the end. But this never happens, and we're left to wonder what his fate will be. In this way, Rebels of the Neon God is not only more complex, but also more realistic than a typical coming-of-age story. After all, for the vast majority of people, their adolescence was messy and full of contradictions. Akwe is perhaps the best embodiment of the contradictions of late youth. In many ways she's quite innocent. She looks very young, and even behaves in childlike ways at times. But she is also shown to be flirtatious and comfortable with casual sex. She drinks heavily and acts with confidence. But much of this seems like a facade. We see that she can't handle the alcohol she drinks, and far from being casual, the sex she has leads to deep feelings and attachment. She is rushing to adulthood, but doesn't seem ready for it. The Chinese name of the film translates as Juvenile Najà. Najà is a deity from Chinese folk religion and character from Chinese mythology. According to the most well-known legends, Najà was a rebellious son who hated his father. In the film, Shao Kang's mum says that the priestess at the temple said that Shao Kang was the reincarnation of Najà. While Shao Kang and his dad do seem to have problems, the nature of the problems and their causes are never explored in the film. For the most part, the father seems hard-working, dutiful, but perhaps grumpy. Shao Kahn doesn't appear outwardly loving or very friendly with his parents, but on the other hand, for most of the film, he doesn't cause a great deal of trouble either.哪吒is also seen as a symbol of rebellion and youthful impulsivity. We can see this idea of哪吒embodied by all the main characters in the film. Perhaps it is in this broader sense that we should interpret the film's references to哪吒. Interestingly, this is what the English title alludes to by saying rebels, plural, rather than rebel of the neon god. Something that is interesting to consider are Shao Kahn's motives. He might simply want revenge for what Adza did to his dad's car. However, it appears to be much more than that. It seems obvious that he envies Adza, and perhaps actually wants to be friends with him. This is most evident when he offers to help Adza. The offer could have been just a way to mock him, but I think it was actually genuine. Unfortunately, there are points in the film when the acting is not as good as it could be. For example, during the kissing scene in the hotel, when the two actors seem quite awkward and not natural. However, the acting is never so bad as to ruin a scene, and for the most part the film is well acted, especially considering the age and experience of the actors. Another small criticism would be that there are times at which the pacing of the film seems a little slow, such as the scene when all three boys are in the arcade, which goes on a little too long without adding anything in either substance or style. However, the film is intentionally slow-paced throughout, and for the most part this does work well. Rebels of the Neon God often focuses on mundane things, and in a way, not a lot happens. But despite that, when the film ends, you do feel that a complete and meaningful story has been told, and you get the sense that you've watched something very interesting, even if you can't quite put your finger on what was so interesting about it.